In the information age of the 21st century, it seems like everyone is focused on the next big celebrity tweet or the new and funny kid vlogging about his dinner on YouTube. In an era of such an overwhelming and instant onslaught of anything and everything under the sun, it's almost second nature to forget how easily we might not be here, how easily we might not be able to follow updates on Twitter or stalk friends' photos on Facebook. I don't mean be here or exist in a spiritual sense. Exist in a more definite sense. What if one small encounter, or lack thereof, was the difference between your life happening and your life not happening? This question led me to look into my family's heritage. I discovered that my paternal grandparents, Herman Becker and Ursula Hahn, met out of sheer luck during the worst of circumstances. However, had they not met, I wouldn't be able to do all of the things I take for granted today. I wouldn't exist. My grandfather was born in Austria in June 1911. 12 years later, my grandmother was born in neighboring Germany. By the 1930s, both Herman and Ursula lived in the United States, but this didn't last long. While my grandfather remained in the United States to pursue his master's degree in Ohio, my grandmother's family moved back to Austria. Due to Hitler's campaign for power, however, Austria became a part of the Third Reich, and in order to keep my grandmother's family in Europe, Ursula, as the eldest child, was sent to a German workers' camp. After becoming horribly ill due to malnourishment at the camp, Ursula was released and sent back to her parents, now in Berlin. She would later attend school in Berlin and acquire a job censoring the letters of Allied POWs in German prisons. It was during this time, the early 1940s, that my grandmother met Ignaz Joseph Moser, the man who was to become her first husband. They were married on March 10, 1944, and resided in Frankfurt, Germany, where Ursula became pregnant with their first child. However, Ignaz was an Austrian fighter forced to work in the German army. Because he was Austrian, he was forced to the front lines with others of his nationality and died in battle in fall 1944. He and Ursula were married less than 6 months, and Ursula's son Wilfred, my half-uncle, never knew his father. He was born on October 4th, 1944. The date on Ignaz's death certificate read October 3rd, 1944. Meanwhile, my grandfather graduated from Ohio State University and enlisted in the U.S. Army Reserves in 1942. He was called into service that same year and appointed a warrant officer in 1943. Warrant officers possessed a high degree of specialization in a certain field. Herman was assigned to document the causes and pattern of suicide among soldiers in U.S. combat locations. He also studied the pattern of stress among U.S. soldiers in order to predict the effect of a soldier's mental state on his military performance. Continuing into 1945, after she learned of the death of her husband, Ursula left young Wilfred behind with her in-laws in Austria and returned to her parents in Berlin. At the same time, Herman was stationed as an English-German interpreter at the German-Austrian border. After Hitler committed suicide and World War II finally ended, leaving a torn continent in its wake, Ursula attempted desperately to recross the border into Austria to retrieve her infant son. However, many of the late Hitler's command were escaping Germany through Austria. American soldiers stationed at the border were supposed to allow no one out of Germany at this time. Ursula was devastated. It was only when she coincidentally came into contact with Herman during this time of desperation and lost hope that she was able to recross the border. He was the only American soldier who would listen to her pleas, and he helped her find her son and take him to safety. A little over a year later, Herman and Ursula were married in a military wedding at Fussem, Bavaria, on December 21, 1946. In June 1947, Herman, Ursula, and Wilfred took a ship from Bremerhaven, Germany, to Baltimore, Maryland. The family settled on the east coast of the United States. My father was Herman and Ursula's 6th child out of 7. After almost 50 years of marriage, my grandfather passed away in January 1995. His funeral and burial took place at Arlington National Cemetery, where he received a flag over his casket and a 21-gun salute for his service in the American military during World War II, as well as the Korean War. 11 years later, my grandmother passed away, and she was buried next to my grandfather at Arlington. Now, in 2010, I visit their gravesite at least once a year. Except next time I go, I will remember the circumstances that first brought them together, and how, had my grandmother not gone to Germany and later attempted to get back into Austria, I wouldn't be narrating this video.